Have you ever noticed how appealing retirement communities sound when you first hear about them? The brochures are glossy, the smiles are wide, and the promise is simple and comforting. No worries, no maintenance, instant friends, and a peaceful life where everything is taken care of. For many people over 60, especially those who don't want to burden their children or keep fixing leaky taps and broken roofs, it feels like a smart, responsible decision, almost like you're finally doing something just for yourself. But let me ask you something gently. Have you ever bought something that looked perfect in the advertisement, only to realize later that the reality felt very different once you were living with it every day? That quiet feeling in your stomach when you realize, this isn't quite what I thought it would be. For many seniors, that feeling arrives slowly after moving into a retirement community, and by the time it becomes clear, changing course can be very difficult. That's why this conversation matters. Not to scare you, not to tell you what to do, but to give you the full picture. Because when it comes to where you spend your later years, surprises are the last thing you want. There are downsides that often stay hidden until after the contracts are signed and the furniture is moved in. And today, we're going to talk honestly about them, like two people having a real conversation over a cup of tea. Let's start with something that catches many people off guard. The loss of control doesn't happen all at once. It creeps in quietly. At first, everything feels convenient. Meals are served on schedule, activities are planned, transportation is arranged. It feels like a relief. But over time, some residents begin to notice that their days are no longer truly theirs. Breakfast is from this hour to that hour. Visitors are allowed during certain times. Renovations in your own unit may need approval. Even small choices, like where you sit or which events you're expected to attend, can start to feel subtly bited. For someone who has lived decades making their own decisions, this can feel surprisingly heavy. You might not notice it in the first few months, especially if you're still settling in, but eventually, that independence you worked so hard to protect can feel thinner than you expected. Many residents say they didn't realize how much freedom they were giving up until they tried to do something spontaneous and were told, kindly but firmly, that it wasn't possible. Another promise that often sounds wonderful is community, the idea that you'll be surrounded by friends, never lonely again, always having someone to talk to. And it's true, there are people everywhere, but being around people and feeling truly connected are not the same thing. In many retirement communities, relationships can stay polite but shallow. People come from very different backgrounds, with different values and personalities, all placed together simply because of age. Some residents feel pressure to fit in, to attend activities they don't enjoy, or to smile through conversations that don't feel natural. Others are surprised by the social politics that can arise, cliques forming just like in school, quiet exclusions, unspoken rules. For seniors who value deep, meaningful relationships, this can feel more isolating than living independently ever did. Loneliness doesn't always disappear just because there are people nearby. Then there's the financial side, which is often explained in ways that sound reassuring but can become stressful later. The initial costs may seem manageable, especially when compared to maintaining a house, but fees can rise over time. Extra services may cost more than expected. Changes in health needs can suddenly shift you into higher cost care levels. Some residents discover that leaving the community later is far more expensive or complicated than they imagined. This can create a quiet anxiety in the background. Worrying about money is not how anyone wants to spend their retirement, and yet many people say they didn't fully understand how locked in the financial structure was until they were already living there. It's not always about dishonesty, it's often about complexity, but complexity can still hurt when it shows up too late. What's important to understand is that none of this means retirement communities are bad for everyone. They can work well for some people, especially with clear expectations and careful planning, but the picture is often incomplete when you're first deciding. The brochures show the best days, not the ordinary ones. The tours highlight the smiles, not the small frustrations that repeat week after week. As we keep talking, it becomes clear that these early surprises are just the beginning of what many residents slowly uncover once the excitement fades and daily life settles in. And understanding those realities now can make all the difference between feeling stuck later and feeling confident in the choices you make for yourself. As time goes on, another realization begins to surface for many residents, and it's one that's rarely discussed openly. The sense of safety and support that's promised can sometimes come with an unexpected emotional cost. Being surrounded by staff, schedules, and systems can slowly change how you see yourself. Some people begin to feel less like capable adults and more like someone who is being managed. Even when staff are kind and well-meaning, the constant oversight can chip away at confidence. You might notice it in small moments. Someone reminds you to take medication you've managed perfectly well for years. Someone insists on helping when you don't feel you need it. Over time, these moments can add up, creating a quiet doubt in your own abilities. Many seniors say they started questioning themselves more after moving in, not because they were incapable, but because the environment subtly suggested they might be. Another downside that often comes as a shock is how quickly life inside a retirement community can begin to feel repetitive. The activities calendar looks full, but after a while it can feel like the same games, the same outings, the same conversations on repeat. Mondays blur into Thursdays. Seasons change, but the routine stays mostly the same. For people who are curious, creative, or used to variety, this sameness can feel draining. It's not that activities are bad, it's that choice becomes limited. You can only attend what's offered when it's offered. If your interests don't align with the majority, you may find yourself opting out more and more, spending time alone in your unit, wondering why you feel less energized than before. Retirement is supposed to be a time to explore, to rediscover passions, yet some people feel their world has actually become smaller. There's also the emotional weight of constant loss that few people talk about before moving in. In a retirement community, residents inevitably face frequent goodbyes. Neighbors move away, become ill, or pass on. While this is a natural part of aging, experiencing it repeatedly, so close to home, can take a toll. You may form a connection with someone over morning coffee, only to find their chair empty weeks later. For sensitive, empathetic people, this can lead to emotional withdrawal. Some residents stop forming close bonds altogether, not because they don't care, but because caring starts to hurt too much. This quiet grief is rarely acknowledged in marketing materials, yet it's a reality many residents live with every day. Another issue that often surprises people is how difficult it can be to maintain strong ties with family and old friends. While retirement communities are meant to make life easier, they're often located away from familiar neighborhoods. Visits may require planning, longer travel, or fitting into visiting hours. Over time, casual drop-ins disappear. Phone calls replace shared meals. Relationships don't end, but they change. Some seniors begin to feel like they're living in a bubble, slightly removed from the real world they once moved freely through. News, trends, and daily life outside the gates feel more distant. For people who value staying connected to all generations, this separation can feel quietly painful. Then there's the question of voice. Many residents are surprised to learn how little influence they have over decisions that affect their daily lives. Changes in management, food quality, staff turnover, or community rules may happen with little input from residents. Complaints may be acknowledged politely, but resolved slowly, if at all. Over time, this can create a feeling of being unheard. Imagine spending decades solving problems, making decisions, standing up for yourself, and then finding that your concerns are filtered through layers of administration. For some people, this feels frustrating. For others, it feels disempowering. Either way, it's not what most imagine when they picture a carefree retirement.
Perhaps one of the hardest truths to accept is that leaving, if you become unhappy, isn't always simple. Selling contracts, waiting lists, financial penalties, or health-related restrictions can make moving out feel overwhelming. Some residents stay not because they're content, but because changing feels too complicated or risky. That sense of being stuck can weigh heavily on emotional well-being. All of these experiences don't usually appear right away. They unfold slowly, quietly, over months and years. At first, everything feels fine. Then small doubts appear, then questions, and eventually some people find themselves wondering why no one talked about these things earlier. What matters most is understanding that these feelings are not a personal failure. They're a response to an environment that doesn't always match the promises made at the beginning. And when you see this clearly, you start to realize that the final and perhaps most important downside has less to do with buildings or policies and more to do with how a person sees their own future and sense of purpose.
For many people, that last realization settles in quietly, often during an ordinary moment. Maybe it's sitting by the window in the afternoon, watching the same view you've seen 100 times before, and wondering when life started to feel smaller instead of freer. Retirement communities often promise peace, but what some residents discover is a subtle loss of purpose. When everything is arranged for you, there's less need to plan, solve, or strive. At first, that feels like rest, but over time, it can turn into a feeling of drifting. Purpose isn't about being busy all the time, it's about feeling needed, challenged, and connected to something that matters. Many seniors spent decades raising families, building careers, helping neighbors, and making decisions that had real impact. Inside a retirement community, opportunities to contribute meaningfully can be limited. Volunteering may exist, but it's often structured and optional, not woven naturally into daily life. Some residents begin to feel like observers rather than participants in the world. This can affect how you see yourself. When days feel pre-planned and expectations are low, it's easy to start believing that less is expected of you too. Not because you've lost ability, but because the environment doesn't ask for it. Over time, this can dim confidence and motivation, even in people who were once energetic and engaged. Another hard truth is that retirement communities are businesses first. Decisions are often driven by efficiency, liability, and profit. Staffing changes, cost-cutting measures, and policy shifts may prioritize the operation over individual happiness. Most residents don't notice this immediately, but it becomes clearer during moments of conflict or need. When you're unwell, unhappy, or asking for flexibility, the system doesn't always bend easily. This can be especially difficult during times of declining health. Care may become more standardized, less personal. The staff may rotate frequently. Familiar faces disappear. For someone who values dignity and personal connection, this can feel unsettling. You may begin to worry not just about today, but how future needs will be handled and whether your voice will still matter. It's important to say this gently and honestly. None of these downsides mean that you've failed if you live in or are considering a retirement community. They simply mean that the decision deserves more thought than it's often given. The biggest risk isn't choosing a retirement community. The biggest risk is choosing one without fully understanding how it might shape your independence, relationships, finances, and sense of self over time. Many seniors who feel content later on are those who stayed deeply involved in decisions, maintained strong connections outside the community, protected their financial flexibility, and continued to seek purpose beyond what was offered. Those who struggled often say they assumed comfort would naturally lead to happiness, without realizing how much happiness depends on autonomy and meaning. If you're watching this while considering your options, give yourself permission to slow down, ask hard questions, spend extended time in any place you're considering, not just a tour. Talk to residents privately, especially those who've been there for years. Notice how you feel when you imagine living there not just this year, but 5 or 10 years from now. And if you're already living in a retirement community and some of this feels familiar, know that you're not alone. Your feelings are valid. There may still be ways to reclaim more control, more purpose, more connection, even within the system. Sometimes that starts with small changes, sometimes with honest conversations, and sometimes with remembering that your life story is still being written. Growing older doesn't mean shrinking your world. It doesn't mean giving up your voice, your choices, or your sense of direction. No matter where you live, you deserve a life that feels like it belongs to you. If any part of this conversation resonated with you, I'd really love to hear your thoughts or experiences in the comments. Your story might help someone else who's standing at a crossroads right now. And if you found this helpful, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. We share honest, practical conversations like this regularly, all focused on living with clarity, dignity, and confidence as we age. Thank you for spending this time with me. Here's to making thoughtful choices, staying curious, and continuing to live fully at every stage of life.